we're continuing our conversation, beginning our conversation really about joy. And I've had a phrase floating through my mind these past number of days as we've begun to talk about joy. It's a line from Mary Oliver that says, "Don't hesitate. Joy is not meant to be a crumb." And I've been thinking about it because I think sometimes we do treat joy that way. Dawn and Lori earlier in the week have both spoken about all the challenges, all the suffering in the world today. And we all know it. We're facing a lot of serious issues. And at least to me, it seems like there's this underlying sense of urgency, as if we need to put our energies into solving these problems, or if not solving them, at least doing something to make a difference. And in those moments, it might feel like joy is a little frivolous or too big an order. It might be relegated to something extra after the hard work is done, if it's deserved at all. And maybe it feels like a crumb. But Mary Oliver's insight is that joy isn't meant to be a crumb. And I've been thinking that actually maybe she got her inspiration from the Buddha, because he certainly taught that joy was not a crumb. I just want to read to you a part of the Dhammapada, which is words from the Buddha. And this is what he said. "Live in joy, in love, even among those who hate. Live in joy, in health, even among the afflicted. Live in joy, in peace, even among the troubled. Live in joy without possessions, like the shining ones. The winner sows hatred because the loser suffers. Let go of winning and losing and find joy." When you hear that, it could almost seem as if the Buddha is speaking to the conditions of today, doesn't it? It's so clear in what he said that he believes that joy is not an adjunct, that joy is such an important piece of our practice, and maybe especially now when the world feels like it's on fire. And so we're going to spend some months steeping in joy, just like we steeped in metta and compassion, so we can feel the importance of uplift of our heart and how that supports us. Before we dive in, I want to touch on all the ways these teachings of the Buddha are infused with joy. And I want to start with the Four Noble Truths, the teaching about the truth of suffering in life. This is the teaching that gives Buddhism a bad rap, actually. It's the teaching that a lot of people will respond to by saying, oh, Buddhism is just a doom and gloom philosophy. But we know that these truths speak to the causes of suffering, and then they outline a path towards the end of suffering. And if you think about it, just for a moment, what is the end of suffering? What is it but a sense of ease that lightens our heart? I mean, think in any moment of relief, when suffering ends, whether it's a headache or some emotional turmoil that's been difficult, when we let go of the struggling against the pain or the turmoil resolves, this is a flavor of joy. And joy is also one of the 7 awakening factors, one of these Buddhist lists. And this list is about the mental qualities that build one on another, one arising from the previous one that outlines a progression towards liberation. It, I think, is brilliant. It starts with a foundation of mindfulness, and each subsequent quality unfolds from the last. It's like this. Mindfulness inspires investigation, which creates energy. And that energy leads to joy. And joy inspires tranquility, which allows for concentration, so wisdom and liberation can unfold. I know I went through that quickly, but I love this. I actually can feel it inside, that idea or that felt sense that joy can lead to a sense of tranquility, which makes concentration so much easier. And then wisdom arises. What I really appreciate about this teaching is that it points to how joy is innate. It can arise from within us, from our practice and our state of mind, without any outside cause, so that we can create our own happiness. And then there is mudita, sympathetic joy, one of the divine abodes, which we've been speaking of, no less than metta or compassion or equanimity. Joy in others' happiness, that deep feeling of being connected. Your joy and my joy are connected. I really appreciate the reciprocity of this, that it goes both ways, that although mudita focuses on feeling happy for another's happiness, I know for myself that it's easiest to feel that kind of happiness when I feel full and contented inside too. So they're both important. Dawn spoke really sweetly about this. She spoke about a happiness within ourselves that's not conceited in any way, but is contented and at ease. And she spoke too about a gratitude practice as a way to open our hearts in that way. We would think that it would be easy to keep our hearts open to joy in our lives. It's such a pleasant feeling. But that's not really always the case. You know, all kinds of feelings can arise. Resentment, envy, judgments. They can be really close. We feel them arise and they block our hearts. They seem to rest in some notion that happiness is in limited supply. And if you get yours, there might not be enough for me. But if we sit like we do each day, and if we practice metta, we know that actually love can feel boundless and spacious. And some say that love is the energy of the universe. It's never in short supply. We just put up barriers. You know, I'm reminded of that quote that I think I've shared with you before, the one from Rumi, that says, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you've built against it. So various teachers use different words to describe the texture of joy. It might be tranquil or contented, happy, joyful, delight, rapture, bliss, uplift. It's like an arc of joyfulness. I've also heard it described as buoyancy. And when I hear that, I picture a buoy in the ocean that's tossed around by waves and pulled under by currents, but it bounces back to the surface, staying afloat. And this is one of the ways in which I think joy is so important to us in these times and in our practice. So as we begin to explore, we can begin to feel these differences. Joy can be quiet and sweet. If you think of what arises when you watch a baby sleeping. And it can have a little bit more energy, like the pleasure of watching kittens playing. And even still, there can be a feeling of exuberance, that feeling of excitement around an activity you have a passion for. I always hear that when I'm in and around Boston, the passion that people have for their sporting teams, that kind of joy. Or maybe it's the delight in celebrating a special birthday with someone that's special to you. The Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, who are, we know, two of the most revered contemporary spiritual leaders that we have, both of them have suffered almost unimaginable tragedies. And they wrote a book together called The Book of Joy. They found joy in the midst of the hatred and the exile and the racism that they confronted. Just as the Buddha described in that piece from the Dhammapada. They had come together to celebrate the Dalai Lama's birthday. And in this book, they share all these great stories of mudita, the joy that they found in each other. When I think of both of them, what I really remember and what I really love is their laughs. They take themselves so lightly. It's really palpable. So that's it. So, today, very serendipitously, I was looking at Lion's Roar, an email that I got, and there's an article by Richard Gere, the actor, about the Dalai Lama. And there's a picture of the Dalai Lama tweaking Richard Gere's nose in playfulness. And Gere writes, I'm just going to read you a little bit of what he writes about the Dalai Lama, because I really think it captures it. He says, His Holiness wakes us up from our dreadful sleep. He is the radiant sun of the universal embrace. He is inclusion, service, and self-sacrifice. He is genuine love. He reminds us who we really are. He makes us larger. He makes us care. He delights us with his wisdom, his joy, his laughter, and his optimism. How impossible it is to be proud and pretentious around someone so utterly simple and kind. This is what we practice joy for. I really look forward to these months ahead, of exploring joy and its nuances with you all, and try to find the ways we can practice to bring it more fully into our lives. So I just want to end. I want to read you the full piece by Mary Oliver, also speaking to the same piece. She says, if you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give into it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We're not wise and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back, that sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power in the world. It could be anything, but very likely you notice it in the instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb. Thank you all for your attention